Call 0345 6060 973.
8 minutes before 8 is the time. As we said earlier, a bit of a grim note in history today. The NHS strikes, putting more lives at risk than ever before. The biggest walkout in the history of the NHS. So let's bring into the conversation Conservative MP and Minister for Mental Health and Women's Health Strategy, and also, I have to say, a nurse herself, Maria Caulfield, who joins me now. Thank you for coming on the show. Noting again that you are both a nurse and I understand a member of one of the unions, the RCN. What is your message to your fellow professionals who are out on the picket lines this morning? Good morning to you, Minister.
Good morning. Well, I think, it's a very sad day to see strike action, and just want to reassure patients in England that from the nursing strike action point of view, it's happening in less than half of all trusts in England. So for the vast majority of patients, they won't be affected in terms of going for procedures and appointments and operations. And if their trust is affected, they would have been in touch with them to let them know what's happening. But obviously, we've got the ambulance strikes on top of that. And I guess my message to fellow union members is that in Scotland, they have suspended strike action there because they are prepared to talk about the forthcoming year's pay review from April. And it would be great if in England, because we are prepared to discuss next year's pay review and working conditions, it would be great if they could call off that strike action so we could get those negotiations underway.
The unions continually assert that it's impossible, that no key minister or anyone has had from the government side has had meaningful negotiations. How fair is that charge?
Well, I think probably before Christmas, I think it was fair to say that pay probably wasn't on the table. But since Christmas, the Secretary of State has met with a variety of health unions almost on a weekly basis during January. And the door is open. And we want to discuss, the forthcoming pay award will start in April. So we do need to have those negotiations. But the unions so far have pulled out of the independent pay review body process, which is very unfortunate. The government will submit its evidence to the pay review body about what's affordable, what they think that we can deliver. And we do need the unions to put their side of the argument too, so that a fair pay offer can be put on the table and hopefully resolve this situation once and for all. Your
colleague Grant Shapps has said while the RCN, the union of which you are a member, has behaved, quotes, responsibly, he has concerns about the ambulance unions, who he says have not supplied enough backup information and detail as to what their level of readiness. How fair is that claim?
Well, I think Pat Cullen has acted very fairly on strike days.
Yes, the ambulance unions, though.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So the difficulty with the ambulance unions is that they're just doing their updates to their local areas. So nationally, we don't have a handle on what strike provision is going to be made available on the day, and it's given at very short notice. So if they're not able to provide emergency response, it's very then difficult to get that backup in place. And so we would welcome the ambulance unions to do exactly what the RCN's doing and be upfront about what service levels they'll provide ahead of strike action.
I can't think of many other senior members of the Conservative Party, indeed ministers, who are also members of a union currently in dispute with the government. How conflicted do you feel?
So I have to declare that as an interest, absolutely. So I wouldn't be allowed to be involved in the negotiations myself because obviously I have got a conflict of interest. But I think there are a number of Conservatives, members of Parliament who have been in unions as well, whether that's teaching unions or other types as well. And so, absolutely, we're about wanting to ensure that people who go out to work are able to keep more of the money that they earn and get a fair deal. And I think I get on very well with Pat Cullen. I'm very respectful of her. But at the end of the day, as a government minister, I've also got responsibility to the purse strings for the taxpayer, so that people can afford any pay rises that are coming down the line.
It's interesting you talk about purse strings and afford these pay rises. Some of my listeners are a little bit puzzled. Currently, I understand in England, the offer to nurses is 4%, but a deal was done with barristers at 15%. How come they get the cash and nurses don't, Minister?
Well, I think, barristers haven't, if you spoke to barristers, they haven't had a pay rise for a number of years.
The same would be said of nurses, of course, Minister.
Well, no, that's not true. Last year, when no one got a pay rise, nurses got 3%. And actually, the 4.5% that's the average pay rise for nurses, new student nurses or new qualified nurses got nearly 9%. So it's not quite as
but the barristers
clear-cut
get
as that.
15. It is a surprise, isn't it? Who's more important in life, do you imagine, a barrister or a nurse?
Well, it depends if you're a criminal facing prosecution. Your barrister's probably pretty important to you.
If I'm fighting for life, I think I'll go for a nurse rather than a barrister. But
well, absolutely, and as you say, I'm conflicted in this as a nurse, and absolutely, nurses do deserve. I got into before I was an MP. I worked with the RCN on the pay cap and the pay freeze that was under the Lib Dem coalition government, and have campaigned for the return of the bursary, which this government has reintroduced, and also for apprenticeship nurses, because that's going really well in getting new nurses into nursing now. So there's a number of options, but absolutely, nurses do. The Prime Minister said this himself last week in his interview, that absolutely they do deserve a pay rise, but we have to be able to afford it as well.
So lastly, you talk about the conflict you have as a member of the RCN. You've criticised Sir Keir Starmer in the past because Labour MPs have been on the picket line, but you'll be aware that in the strike in December, the chief nurse, Dame Ruth May, was on a picket line, and she's a government official. How appropriate is that? And if she does it again, should she possibly face losing her job?
Look, Ruth's got to represent all nurses, and of course she wants to go and hear from those who are striking on the picket line.
She can hear via telephone, can't she, or email? She doesn't need to go on a picket line.
Yeah, but absolutely. But, I don't have necessarily Ruth does a very good job in terms of representing.
Should she be on the
nurses,
picket line again? How would you react?
Well, that's for Ruth to decide. I'm not going to personally criticise her.
Well, you criticise Labour MPs and Sir Keir Starmer for going on picket lines. Why wouldn't you criticise this government official?
Well, I think, the difference is that Labour are funded by the unions, and so they have a vested interest in these strikes ongoing. Absolutely, but we want to get a resolution, and so we do need to speak to those nurses who are striking. The door is open. The Secretary of State is very clear. He wants to talk about the pay award for this year. So all of us want to speak to nurses, because that's the only way we're going to get this resolved and the strikes ended. Well,
let's all say amen to that idea, and thank you for your time, Maria Caulfield, who, remind you, is a nurse herself and is also Minister for Mental Health and Women's Health Strategy. Thank you for that. 2 minutes to 8. Let's go quickly now to this story developing. It says here in Turkey, it's actually on the Turkish-Syrian border, this powerful earthquake, which is the latest, what's called copy handed to me, has the death toll moving over 500. Let's go to Hannah Lucinda Smith, who's Turkey correspondent for The Times. I think she's still reporting from Istanbul.